This is titled Urgency and Perfection: Why Speed and Fear Shut Down Real Results and Real Progress. Hey, before we jump in, just want to ground us again. This is actually part of a series that I'm calling Culture Beneath the Crisis. And so this is where I help people slow down, name what's actually happening, what's actually shaping our responses, and build capacity to lead differently when things get uncomfortable. My name is Jesse Ross, and I work at the intersection of leadership, culture, community, and systems. And most of my work is centered around helping individuals and organizations move from good intention to real capacity. Right here, this is not about blame. This is actually about clarity. So in the last episode, I introduced 4 cultural patterns that quietly shape how we respond when pressure is high. And hopefully you can notice my voice is a little better. Today, I want us to slow down and spend some time with the first 2, which is urgency and perfectionism, because these are the ones that people most defend. Again, urgency feels responsible, and perfectionism can feel careful. And when those 2 get together and show up, they create a system that feels constantly busy, but rarely transformative. So if you ever felt rushed and stuck at the same time, hopefully this episode will help you name the why. So let's talk about urgency. Urgency is one of those patterns. It's probably the hardest pattern to critique because it usually shows up in moments of real pain, right? So people are hurting, or the moment feels super serious. Silence feels irresponsible. But to be clear, urgency is real sometimes, right? Sometimes situations require an immediate response. And the problem is when urgency becomes the default, right? It's not a situational response. It's just what we go to for default. When you're in a culture that is focused on urgency, speed is the virtue. Moving fast is framed as leadership, and slowing down is framed as a hesitation. When you ask questions, sometimes it gets labeled as being resistant. And most people have actually experienced this. A situation usually escalates it, a meeting gets called quickly. Again, there's little preparation. Decisions are made by the same voices, but someone asked the question, had we thought this through? Or how come you didn't include someone? So that urgency didn't create clarity. It actually created distance. And inside of institutions, literally urgency can look like decisions being announced instead of discussed. Burnout is framed as dedication. Feedback is treated as a delay, and relationships are sacrificed based off output. And the hard truth about urgency is it's usually has nothing to do with time, but it's about control. When we're in institutions around focused on urgency, right? They want to control the narrative. They want to control the process. They want to even control the discomfort. So I asked, I think in the last session, where does urgency show up in how you lead? And who benefits from moving fast? And who absorbs the cost after we move? So now let's talk about perfectionism. If urgency says we need to act now, perfectionism is, but not like that. Perfectionism often sounds as reasonable. It shows up as caution. It shows up as professional. It shows up as wanting to get it right. But perfectionism becomes harmful when fear replaces the learning process. Sorry. Sometimes you hear it in phrases like this. We're still working on the language. We don't want to say the wrong thing. We need more time. We're being very careful and calculated. But nothing happens. Time goes by, weeks pass, sometimes even months. And here's what perfectionism actually does inside the systems. It makes mistakes feel like that's too dangerous instead of just instructing what we should do, right? It teaches people to perform competence instead of practicing growth. And it convinces organizations that silence is actually safer than accountability. What's crazy about that is perfectionism doesn't protect people from harm at all. It only protects the institutions from actually being vulnerable. So when we get to a place where learning is actually unsafe, people stop experimenting. And when growth feels risky, people choose silence. So do me a favor and pause again. Where does the fear of getting it wrong slow movement inside your organization, your leadership, your institution? And who's actually allowed to learn in public? Better yet, who's expected to already know? Okay, so you're probably asking, how do these two work together? Of course. So if urgency says we don't have time, perfectionism says we're not ready, so that means organizations get to bounce in between. So they not only rush decisions, not only make long pauses, not only is frustration and burnout apparent, but people experience whiplash. Trust erodes. And it doesn't erode because people don't care, but it erodes because the system feels super unpredictable and unsafe. People don't know what to expect and don't know or trust that you're going to do the right thing or in their best interest. Some people will comply quietly, others slowly disengage. Fewer people speak up, and when they do, they pay for it. So it's not a motivational problem necessarily, it's centered around their values. And institutions don't recognize, or they do recognize and don't care, that this is part of the culture. So if we are to interrupt this and change, it doesn't mean that we have to ignore reality. I think it means that we gotta slow decisions down just enough to include the voices that actually matter. It means recognizing that relationship is not a distraction from the work. It actually is the work. And interrupting perfectionism doesn't mean that we have to lower our standards, right? It means that we can learn and have shared responsibility. We can have mistakes or allow mistakes to generate some insight instead of building shame. And it means that if we're being transparent, we can do that instead of being performative. I believe that capacity grows when people are allowed to learn in public, and systems change when they decide that learning is actually safer than silence. So as I put this together, I was really hoping that this would be a short, digestible way to think about how these two show up. What does it look like? I know I have to go do a deeper dive into the other two, individualism and the right to comfort. But those patterns, when I think about it, they answer a different set of questions, right? Responsibility is personalized. Sometimes why is accountability feeling threatened? And if you're uncomfortable, why does that mean that we failed? So if this felt familiar, if urgency and perfectionism felt familiar, I would invite you to stay. If this felt like something that you never heard of or you needed to hear again, I would invite you to share this with somebody else. Really hoping that the next conversation can explain why awareness doesn't change anything. Really hope that as you dive into this, if urgency and perfectionism shape how you lead, it doesn't make you a bad person. It means that you inherited something, culture, that needs to be examined. So I hope you stay curious, I hope you stay reflective, and I hope you don't rush or confuse that moving fast equates polish or even progress.